The late afternoon light was fading into a soft golden hue, the kind that made the world seem warmer than it really was. Emma sat on a weathered wooden bench by the shoreline, her sketchbook open on her lap, pencil moving slowly over the page. The waves stretched out endlessly before her, each one rolling in with a rhythm that soothed her mind. She barely noticed the faint sound of footsteps approaching, not until the shadow fell across her page. When she looked up, Daniel was standing there, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, the wind tugging playfully at his golden hair. There was something in his eyes, something heavier than casual conversation. "You know," he began, his voice low and steady, "life isn't just about the things we teach in classrooms. It's about what we feel and who we feel it with." He spoke as if each word carried the weight of a long-kept truth. Emma felt her heart tighten. She tilted her head slightly, studying his face. "And what do you feel, Daniel?" she asked softly, her pencil forgotten in her hand. For a moment, he didn't answer. He simply looked at her, as if memorizing the way the wind brushed strands of hair across her face, the way her eyes held both curiosity and caution. Then slowly, he stepped closer. The gravel crunched beneath his shoes, the sound sharp against the muffled roar of the sea. He reached for her hand, his fingers curling gently around hers. His touch was warm, yet there was a faint tremor there, like the quiet shiver of a confession about to be spoken. "I feel," he said finally, his eyes locked on hers, "that you're the one who hears even my silences." The words came out with a kind of reverence, as though they had been carefully guarded, waiting for the right moment. Emma's breath caught in her chest. The world around them seemed to soften. The waves sounded further away, the wind quieter. She realized he wasn't just saying something romantic. He was revealing a truth, something deeply personal, the kind of truth that changes the air between two people. His thumb brushed over the back of her hand, a small, tender movement that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. Her lips parted, but no words came. She didn't need to speak. The way she looked at him, the way her fingers tightened around his, said enough. It was the unspoken acknowledgement that she, too, had been hearing his silences all along. The moment stretched, unhurried, as if time itself had chosen to give them space to exist in this fragile, beautiful honesty. And in that pause, standing by the endless sea, they both knew something had shifted, something quiet, yet irreversible. A fine mist began to drift from the heavy clouds above, the kind of gentle drizzle that blurs the edges of the world. The air smelled of salt and rain, and the sea seemed to breathe with them, each wave rolling in as if keeping pace with their hearts. Daniel still held Emma's hand, his thumb brushing across her skin as though reluctant to let go, and she could feel the warmth of his palm even through the cool, damp air. She didn't pull away. Instead, her gaze lingered on his face, on the way his eyes searched, hers as though looking for something that had been missing all his life. He stepped closer, and the sound of the waves seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the slow, measured rhythm of their breathing. A drop of rain touched her cheek, cool against her skin, and Daniel's hand rose instinctively, brushing it away with his fingertips. His touch lingered a heartbeat too long, not out of hesitation but out of quiet reverence. The space between them had grown impossibly small, yet it felt like the safest place in the world. Emma's lips parted slightly as if to speak, but Daniel didn't give the moment to words. His eyes dropped to her lips, then back to her gaze, seeking a silent permission. She didn't move away, if anything. She leaned the slightest bit closer, her breath mingling with his. The drizzle thickened, tiny droplets catching in her hair, clinging to his lashes, and the whole world seemed wrapped in silver light. He reached up, his fingers gently tucking a damp strand of hair behind her ear, his knuckles grazing her skin. Then, slowly, he closed the final inch between them, pressing his lips to her forehead, in a kiss so soft it felt like a promise, whispered against her soul. Emma's eyes fluttered shut at the tenderness of it, and before she could open them again, his mouth found hers. The kiss was unhurried, deep without force, warm despite the rain cooling their skin. His lips moved with a patience that made her heart ache, as though he wanted to memorize the exact feel of this moment, to etch it into his memory forever. She leaned into him, her free hand resting lightly against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her touch. The rain was falling harder now, running down their faces, dampening their clothes, but neither of them cared. They were lost in the press of lips, the shared breath, the silent conversation of two people who had finally stepped into the truth of what they felt. When they finally pulled back, only far enough to look at each other, Daniel's forehead rested against hers, and the rain dripped from the tips of their noses. Neither spoke because the kiss had already said everything. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm, each drop striking the sand and sea with a quiet persistence. Daniel's forehead still rested against Emma's, their breaths mingling in the cool, damp air. Neither of them seemed ready to move, as if breaking the closeness would somehow shatter the fragile, perfect moment they had just created. The world beyond the rain and the waves didn't matter. All that mattered was the nearness, the warmth, the unspoken truth that had finally been set free. Daniel's hands were still around hers, fingers interlaced now, holding her like someone afraid to lose what he had just found. His voice was low when he finally spoke, a soft rumble that seemed to blend with the rain. "Life teaches us many things," he said slowly, his words deliberate, as though he wanted her to feel each one. "But the greatest lesson is knowing when you've found the right person, and never letting them go." Emma looked at him, her lips parting slightly as she searched his eyes. There was no doubt there, no hesitation, only the quiet certainty of someone who had discovered a truth too important to ignore. The rain clung to his lashes, traced along his cheekbones, and she thought, for the first time in a long time, that maybe she was exactly where she was meant to be. She let out a small breath that was almost a laugh, not from amusement, but from the sheer weight of relief. "And the most beautiful art," she whispered, her voice just as soft as his, "is the one two hearts create together." Her words weren't rehearsed. They rose naturally, like they had been waiting all along for this moment to be spoken. Daniel smiled then, not a wide, showy grin, but something quiet and profound. The kind of smile that comes when someone feels completely seen. His fingers tightened slightly around hers, and for a moment he simply looked at her, as if committing her face to memory under the gray sky. The rain didn't stop, but it no longer felt cold. It felt like part of them now, a witness to the promise that had just been made. Around them, the world continued. The waves rolled in. The gulls cried somewhere far off. But their little corner of the shoreline felt untouched, sealed in its own pocket of time. They began to walk slowly along the beach, their shoulders brushing, hands still linked. Neither needed to fill the silence. It was a silence that spoke of understanding, of trust, of a future neither had dared to imagine until now. Every step felt like the beginning of something that would not fade. A new chapter written not in ink, but in shared moments, in steady gazes, in the quiet certainty that they had found in each other, what they hadn't found anywhere else. And as they walked, the rain continued to fall, not as an ending, but as a blessing.